Hi, I'm Mike Knetter, and welcome to the UW Now Livestream series, where we bring you experts from the UW community talking about various aspects of the COVID-19 crisis. Now that the December holidays are upon us, how can we stay healthy and active at home as we ride out this critical phase of the pandemic? Joining me tonight are two faculty members who will share with us some easy and fun things we can do, and maybe not too many warnings. Beth Olson is here with us, and she helps individuals and families make healthy nutrition choices. And Cindy Kuhrasch is an expert on movement education. And the two of them will give us some helpful tips on how to get through the holidays and come out in better shape than we went into it, provided we can follow their advice. Could be a tall order. First up this evening is Beth Olson, and she's an associate professor and extension specialist in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at UW-Madison. Professor Olson began her career at the Kellogg Company, working first in global research and development, followed by a position in nutrition marketing. She spent the past 20 years in academia in community-based nutrition research and programs. Her research and outreach at UW-Madison is focused on helping families, and in particular, new parents make better choices about nutrition and health. In recent months, Beth has written about nutrition during the pandemic and will share some of her insights with us tonight. A native of Wisconsin, she obtained her Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry from UW and her master's and PhD from the University of California, Davis. Beth, thanks for being here, and I look forward to hearing some great tips from you on how much fun I'll be able to have over the holidays.
Thank you, Mike. It's such a pleasure to be here. With that introduction, it always makes me feel like I'm a little bit older than I thought I was. Anyway, eat, drink, and be merry. So I chose that title very deliberately because this is a season where we have a lot of seasonal favorites that we want to eat. And although as a nutritionist, I'm always anxious that we think about how food can be healthy for us, can be fuel for us to do what we want to do. I also know that during this time especially, it's something that we do to be merry, and that's okay. But what are a few things we do want to consider during this season? We do want to think about our health. You know, this is the cold and flu season, and we want to think about how we keep our immune system strong. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Also give you just a few ideas on how you can be careful when you prepare your food and serve it, and how you can really keep it safe. Nobody wants to be sick during the holidays. And then I want to wrap up with what I think is also really important, and that is, who do we share our food with? You know, our friends, our family, the people we care about, and what are the cultures and the traditions that it represents for us? So what is your health concern? So many of us are used to choosing our foods for some reason. It might be just enjoyment, but it also might be because we're looking to, watch our blood pressure or reduce our risk of some disease, or maybe we work out and we need that fuel. But as I said, this is the cold and flu season, and this year it's also the COVID season. And so we really want to look at how do we keep healthy in this time. So we need to have an overall healthy diet. So I hate to say it because I know a lot of people would like it, but there aren't any magic bullets. And so when we look at nutrition to keep us healthy, we really have to be playing the long game. Be a badger and play that long game. You need to be eating healthy. Each day we want to think about what can we do to be healthy. But what's most important is how we eat over the long term. And so really the best data and the best research is about having a total healthy diet that includes really a wide variety of whole foods and foods within each food group having a wide variety. So that kind of, those kind of foods would be our whole grains, our fruits and vegetables. Many of you might have seen the USDA's promotions like Eat the Rainbow, make half your plate whole grains. And also within our protein foods, we want to look at eating a wide variety of plant proteins, which often people don't think about. They think about the animal products, things like meat and fish, but we should also be thinking about are plant proteins. And I don't want to leave out other foods. I did work in a food company, and I think one thing we do want to think about is our processed foods. So especially in this time of COVID, where some of us aren't shopping as often, we're buying more things and putting them in our pantry and then cooking throughout the week. There can be a real excellent use of frozen foods or canned foods, boxed goods from your pantry. And so what do we need to do for that is check the food labels. So there's lots of stuff on the front of food labels. And I think the thing to do is turn to the back, turn to the side, and look at the nutrition facts panel on the side and the ingredient listing. That's what's going to tell you what's in that food. And the numbers that are on the side are general. They maybe don't apply exactly to everybody, but they're really good for comparison. So if you're picking out 2 cereals, for instance, take a look at the side and pick one that's lower in sugar and higher in dietary fiber. But the other point I wanted to make is a lot of people are worried about during the holidays, might they gain a lot of weight? And sometimes you see that in popular press articles. It will say we gained 10 to 15 pounds. So that actually has been studied, and we don't gain that much weight during the holidays. The average weight gain is actually 1 pound. So, that's not too bad. I think what we are concerned about sometimes is that year after year after year, 1 pound eventually becomes 5 and could become 10. But the good news is, if it's only 1 pound, that's something that perhaps we can just pay a little bit more attention to during the holidays and avoid. So things like looking at the portion sizes that you're taking and reading the food labels. And maybe when you're making your family favorites, think about is the way that I can make this one just a little bit more healthy. But I think the other big thing is when we do choose some of the foods that we like to eat, let's pick it, let's enjoy it. Let's sit down, eat slowly and enjoy it and not feel guilty. Right now, there's a lot of stress in everybody's lives. And the last thing we need to do is to add on more stress by feeling guilty for just enjoying our holiday foods. Next slide. However, as I said, no one wants to be sick during the holidays. So there are some tips, and there is a website at the bottom. It goes to the CDC. Also, great sources of information on safety during the holidays are at USDA and FDA. They're all great agencies on providing this information. So wash hands, wash hands, wash hands. Everybody's probably heard that a lot. Before you eat, before you prepare food, before you cook, before you put away your groceries, wash your hands really well. That's going to go a long way to keeping us from getting sick or any kind of food poisoning. Then be careful of temperatures. So at this website, at FDA, USDA websites, you can get nice charts that will tell you when you're cooking various foods, what temperatures do you need to get them to, things like turkey as pictured here, and other foods. But also think about when you're serving them and storing them that you keep them safe. So I had a family member a long time ago that used to like to make a big pot of something for the family, say on Christmas Eve, and just let it sit out on the stove, all evening long and everybody could eat. But really, we have about a 2-hour window that food can be out, and then we should be putting it away into the fridge. You want to either keep foods cold or keep them very hot, because in between is where germs can grow. And then the care with raw ingredients. So there are a lot of holiday treats made with raw eggs that can cause food poisoning. So there are a variety of both whole and like this, other kinds of egg products that are pasteurized. So if there is a dish that you would like to use raw eggs, use pasteurized eggs. And then the other big one that people might have seen out in the news this week, the Wisconsin Department of Health warned people that something called a cannibal sandwich, which honestly I had not heard of, because when I was growing up and my parents served it, they called it steak tartare, which I think sounds quite a bit more elegant. But that is raw beef and is often used as an appetizer before a meal food, and also is something that can lead to food poisoning and is just not a good idea. Next slide. So I'm going to finish up with, so what's important? What's important to you? I think our family, our friends, the people that we care about that we're going to spend time with and share this food with are what's important. And also what we're eating and what we're eating with people we care about reflects often our culture and the traditions that we have in our culture and in our family. And I think that's really important. And of course, this year, like Thanksgiving, we're being warned to be careful about traveling and gathering with too many people that don't live in our household during our celebrations. And so just like we've been saying for a while, think about virtual gatherings. Can you, like we are here tonight, get together virtually? I've already seen some Facebook posts of friends who gathered together people they usually meet up with to make Christmas cookies, and they're cooking those each in their own home and sharing them. My own family has been sending Snapchat messages to each other showing the various cookies that they've been making. You could also cook a meal together. Perhaps everybody's cooking the same thing and you can cook at the same time and chat and give each other tips. And then do the same when you're eating and drinking. Maybe it's hard to share a whole meal while you're on Zoom or some other online platform, but maybe you could do your appetizer before and greet each other, or perhaps afterwards, as in the picture here, you could have a glass of wine and relax and talk about how your day went. This is also a time where many people have found that their children are home with them more than they had been in the past. So maybe this is a good time to involve them in these holiday traditions. There's often the feeling that kids don't know how to cook anymore, so perhaps we start involving them in our cooking. If you need to, if you're trying to help them learn, this is a great way if they're measuring to do some math. It's a way to look up some things in science. Why does yeast make the rolls rise? So there's lots of lessons you can incorporate in and get to spend time with your kids. And in this time, you could share some family history. This is why we eat these foods. This is what they mean in our religion or the country where our grandparents came from and things like that. And in doing so, make some of your own memories so that, there's a lot of memories we have from the holidays. I don't think that this year it needs to be different. We can still make those memories. And then take a moment to just stop, enjoy, breathe, and enjoy those holiday foods. So I just wanted to finish up with a quote on health. Often people, again, think there's some magic bullet, and I thought this quote was great, saying, "For good health, eat lightly, breathe deeply, live moderately, cultivate cheerfulness, and maintain an interest in life." So I think this applies to the food that we eat and the other things we do to be healthy. We want to pay attention, but we don't want to stress ourselves out, especially over the holidays. I think it's more important to just enjoy our foods, enjoy our friends, enjoy our family, and have a good holiday. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Beth. I'm sure we'll be back with questions about steak tartare or the so-called cannibal sandwich and whether your parents have sworn it off and the caloric content of the virtual cookie. I need to know. So next up, we have Cindy Kuhrasch. She's a distinguished faculty associate in the Department of Kinesiology and program director in the physical education teacher education program. She teaches methods, assessment, curriculum, class management, and technology coursework and supervises the placement and evaluation of student teachers. In addition, she's served as a consultant in many school districts, working in the areas of curriculum development, instructional strategies, and technology. She's presented and published on a wide variety of education topics, both locally and nationally. In community service, she serves on the executive board for the Boys and Girls Club of Dane County. She received her bachelor's in physical education and health education and her master's in human performance at UW La Crosse. Cindy, thanks for being with us tonight. Give us a few pointers to stay fit in case we can't follow Beth's advice.
Or maybe in combination, right? Thanks, Mike. I'm really glad to be here. And I want to talk just a little bit about the physical activity side of what's going to happen over the holidays, or what could happen for all of us on a regular basis. So first of all, this focus will be just on staying active and healthy during COVID-19, and I should say, and beyond, because this, like Beth was saying, is something that we should be in for the long haul. So if you could go to the next slide, I guess first we need to start with the bad news, right? So COVID-19 has had effects on really three different groups that I work with a lot. So my constituents would be children and youth, parents, and then educators. So just looking at children and youth, I mean, there are the obvious sort of physical benefits. I don't know if you can see this very well, but I can say that we know that physical activity levels are down, unfortunately. And also, even a little more significantly, are some of the other sort of issues, like students are reporting having really negative feelings, or avoidance of reminders and problems with attention, or reactivity symptoms. And even short-term changes in these things can become permanently entrenched. And that's the real problem, I think, is that we're worried about the fact that these things that are happening right now may be continuing for the long term, which is a little bit scary. So if you could go to the next slide. And we think about parents too. I mean, parents are really experiencing some stressors. They related that they've had some stressors related to high anxiety and depressive symptoms. And also, they don't really understand what's happening. There's so much lack of predictability, and that's very scary for people. Some people are reporting a lost sense of time or a lost sense of security. And some studies are even saying that the parents' lack of confidence in their parental role is resulting in high stress and a change in the discipline or the frequency of discipline that they're offering to their students. So all of these constituents are interrelated, but clearly we can see that parents are experiencing some stress. If you could go to the next slide. Educators too are really struggling right now. They are experiencing the same kinds of stresses and are trying to cope with this situation. They're experiencing that same sort of lack of predictability. They might be experiencing some detachment. The distancing, for me as a teacher, it's hard not to see my students. It's a relational experience to teach, and it's really hard not to be with them all the time. And some studies are saying too that really even this high stress level is similar to what healthcare workers are experiencing as well. So that's the bad news. Let's move on a little bit and just think about something that we've been thinking about in our work for a while, and that is that all of these things that we're experiencing right now, many of them are not just related to COVID, but they are trends that we've been experiencing all along. It's just that COVID is really exacerbating some of those. So if we could look at the next couple of slides, and I'll just kind of whiz through those. One is obesity, and this map shows the different levels of obesity among people in the different states of the United States. The percentages, the number of people who have been identified as obese in these different states. And we know that obesity is a problem, which is being negatively affected by COVID. If you could go to the next slide, we also know that loneliness has been an issue for a while. It's one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about with my students. But we know that loneliness is almost becoming its own epidemic, because so many people are starting to feel lonely and representing themselves as lonely. And COVID is just really, really doing a number on the impact of loneliness on people's well-being. So that's something we need to pay attention to. And if you could go to the next slide. We also know that mental health has been an issue for a while. And all of these statistics are from before COVID. And we know that these numbers are just going to go up. And we don't actually even know the full ramifications of mental health as a result of COVID and being stuck in places with a lack of relational connection between people. So some of these trends that we are concerned about have been trends that we've been thinking about for a while. So let's move into some of the more positive elements. So how can physical activity help? besides the obvious of increased muscle strength and cardiovascular health, I mean, what are some of the other things that are beneficial? We know that physical activity boosts the immune system, which is kind of a big deal during COVID-19. We also know that physical activity can reduce stress and anxiety, which also is a big deal since we see that many people are responding to the trauma of the pandemic with stress and anxiety. And we also know that physical activity can actually improve sleep, which is a great thing for those of us who tend to go to bed and sort of just think about, I don't know what's happening tomorrow. I'm worried about what's happening tomorrow. So we know that physical activity can actually help get us into a sleep pattern that helps us rest. So those are the regular, the sort of overall beneficial things that we know about physical activity. But the question is, what kind of physical activity? So is it any kind of physical activity that can help? And maybe the answer to this is no, if you look at this image, because many of you probably, unfortunately, have had a physical education experience or a physical activity experience that was similar to what you see on the screen, where there was a sort of scary person in front of you yelling at you and asking you to do things that didn't seem a lot of fun, but that were physically active and could, clearly benefit your physical health. So with COVID happening, what we're finding is a lot of people are going back to sort of the fitness part of physical activity. And I'm not saying that that's bad, but what I am saying is that a lot of times when we do fitness activities, we're actually doing them by ourselves. We're also doing them in many cases because of a body image, and we want to make sure our bodies are looking great. None of that is bad. The body image isn't bad, but being by ourselves when we're exercising isn't necessarily always great. And you even see the fitness industry sort of responding to this with things like Peloton, where, you've got this coach who's firing you up every morning. And more recently, the mirror, where there's like this kind of creepy person in the mirror sort of exercising with you and cheering you on. Because these companies recognize that when you're exercising with people or you're moving with people, there is this incredibly added benefit that really helps you reap everything you can from the physical activity in which you're participating. So if we could scoot to the next slide, let's talk about really transformative physical education or transformative physical activity. So our program has really begun to understand the fact that movement can be used as the medium through which we can experience relational growth, social and emotional skill growth, and cognitive growth. So most people really enjoy playing, even if they act like they don't. Like sometimes maybe a middle schooler will tell me that they really don't like playing. But if we get them doing something, there is this sort of natural thing that we all enjoy, especially if we can play together. So we tend to use movement as a medium through which people can come together and enjoy what they're doing, but also experience some relational growth. So if you could go to the next slide. One of the things we found in our physical education program, because we recognize this uniqueness of movement to be transformative, is that we were teaching these classes and our physical education students were becoming really close. Our cohorts were amazingly connected. They were really supportive of one another. They had very honest conversations. They grew together as people. They grew individually as people. And so we started offering one of our courses specifically to people outside of our program. And that course we ended up calling, it's a community building class. So we use movement as a way to build community. And then we teach students how to also use movement to build community wherever they go in their lives. And some of the things that we found is that students immediately loved this course. They really flocked to it. We offered multiple sections. We can't keep it open very long. It fills up super quickly. And these are just a couple of the comments that students reported after having been in this class. I never really considered learning how to build a community. Now I can see that everything we talked about, I use in everyday life. This class prepared me well on how to build a community in my future work. Absolutely love this class. Everyone should be required to take it. So we're finding that students love being in community. They long for it. And it's not just university students. It's the adults that we offer this kind of community building to. It's little children, it's teachers, it's committee members. And so I'm making the assumption, which I know you shouldn't do, that most people really love connecting on a deep and authentic level with people. And so we've decided we want to use movement as a medium through which we can do that. So what does that have to do with everything? Well, if we could go to the next slide. We really have come to understand that transformative physical education can provide the answer to a lot of the COVID-related and current trend-related issues that we're concerned about. So transformative physical activity can be relational. It can help people relax. It can help reduce anxiety. We can reap all the physical benefits from it, but it can also really help us with some of the mental health and social issues that we are struggling with as well. So, blah, 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 that's a lot of me talking. I would love it if you could walk through an activity with me right now. So if you're with somebody, that's fantastic. If you're not, also fantastic. But if you could just grab a piece of paper, if you've got a piece of paper near you, just crinkle it up. Anything will do, a part of a newspaper, not if your friend or spouse is reading it, but just grab a piece of paper and crunch it up into a little ball. If you've got someone to play with, what I'm going to ask you to do is try to tap this ball back and forth with your friend as many times as you can in a row without missing. And if you do miss, just start again and see how many you can get. So I don't have a friend with me right here, right now. But if you do, I'm challenging you to do this. But what you'll do is actually just tap this up in the air and try to keep it tapping as many times as you can. I don't know how much I went off the screen or not. You maybe have the benefit of standing up and doing this, but I want to give you a chance to just go ahead and try that for just 1 second. I'll do it too, and hopefully we can all set a new high score for ball tapping. So here we go. Oh, the physical educator misses. You got to love it. Okay, so whether you were able to beat your own score or not, some of the things we just learned in that activity were volleying, which is a physical skill. It's a psychomotor skill, which is a basic skill we would normally teach to our kids. There's a cognitive element because we're counting. And also probably you figured out that if you tap with a certain amount of effort, you were more or less successful. And if you had the benefit of playing this with somebody else, you probably learned some really cool things like how to communicate, like I'll get it or you get it. This one's yours. This one's mine. You probably laughed. You probably experienced some joy and some teamwork at maybe beating your own score. All of those things in a simple little activity where you scrunched up a piece of paper and played a little game with somebody in your house. So that's the kind of transformative movement that can be as simple as batting a ball or as a little more complicated as something that you might do in a gym that can sort of help us overcome some of the things we're experiencing during COVID and in our society in general. So if you could go to the next slide, how have we used this transformative physical education in the midst of COVID? Well, we've done a couple of things, and our students are amazing, and the fact that they're connected has really helped them perform at a high level. So some of the things they've done is they've created a virtual curriculum that has been used by the Madison Public Schools and the Catholic Diocese schools and other districts that I don't even maybe know about because we've shared it freely, that offers simple activities that kids can do at home, both on a psychomotor level or a physical level, a cognitive level, so in ways for them to impact their thinking, and in a social level. So activities that will engage them in all three domains, which is one of the powers of transformative physical education. And what are we doing next? So what are our hopes for the future? If you could go to the next slide. What we want to do is we'd really like to continue to involve other students on campus. We'd love to take our physical education students and have them use their skills to connect UW students to one another. We see the need for it. We see students longing for it, and we'd really like to do more of that. We'd also love to have, a big space in which we can do that. And we'd love to offer team building, community building skills to every UW student who wants it so that they can take that on the road. And pretty soon the whole world will be affected by strong communities that all started here at UW-Madison. So thank you. You can tell I get a little passionate about this. Our goal is really to train teachers to use the transformative potential of movement to teach physical, mental, and social skills and impact everyone they come in touch with. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Cindy. And thank you, Beth. I'm sure we're going to have some great questions tonight. I was wondering if I could start off with a question for you, Cindy, right away. You just did an indoor activity with us. What is your thinking on indoor versus outdoor? Is there extra benefit from getting out and getting fresh air? And how can people come around to embracing outdoor winter activities? Do you have any advice for us?
Right. I mean, for those of us that grew up in Wisconsin, I think we see winter as sort of a necessary evil. But there is this added, I think you're right. I think there is this added benefit of getting out there and experiencing sort of the beauty of nature in whatever we do too. So I don't know that there is a magic bullet, like Beth said, I don't know that there's one for health. I'm not sure that there's one for physical activity either, except that if you incorporate play, in my experience, everything is it's a little less cold, maybe. It's a little less windy if you're enjoying play, and especially if you're with somebody else.
And can I ask, do you feel like the competitive sports that maybe run through recreational sports on campus, is that the same as transformative physical education, or are you looking for more collaborative games as opposed to zero-sum competition?
Yeah, it's a really great question. There is a benefit to competitive activities because it's a way for you to challenge yourself and get to your best self, right? But there's this other part that is the cooperative activities offer. They can both be very relational. We tend to see really strong relationships happen in competitive sports when participants are very successful. So, or they overcome a goal. So maybe they've gone from an 0-6 season to a 6-6 season, right? So anytime you overcome a goal with a group, you're going to connect relationally. So if the sport is, the competitive sport is including that, awesome. But with cooperative activities, in general, you're going to see that automatic relational thing happen if the activity is set up intentionally. Great question.
So Beth, you confessed that your parents had the steak tartare tradition. I guess maybe they're in a different income group than my parents were, because we were on the cannibal sandwich. I don't know if that's regional or income based or education in the household, but have you talked them off the ledge, or are they still having it, or are they done with that?
No, we stopped doing that years ago. I think once people realized that they actually probably stopped, more related to health. I think the idea of eating, meat as your appetizer and then meat again for dinner. I think that's why they stopped. But then, as we became more aware that, and I'm not sure while we were growing up that our food systems had some of the same issues that evolved over time. So it may have been a little bit safer. I don't remember anybody getting sick. But I think once we realized that wasn't a good idea, that tradition went away.
Well, we never really had that tradition, but I will say I spent a couple of fall terms in Berlin, and the local neighborhood hangout, served food. It was a pub, but they were a very good restaurant. And every night at 9:00, they brought out the steak tartare on the house for everybody to have some. And I got in the groove. I just closed my eyes and went with it. You can't fight the locals, So Beth, somebody has a great question, I think, for you. There are a lot of food crazes that come along, often touting great health benefits. Are there any current food crazes that you think maybe don't live up to the hype, or which you think need to be debunked? Or what are your thoughts on food crazes? Do they exist?
Oh, sure. I think the biggest ones usually are weight loss diets. And I just think in general, none of them end up really living up to the hype. I think one thing that happens is people find a new way of eating. They pay attention to what they're eating, so they take out some calories. And most of the diets in some way have you cutting calories. This is why you lose weight. But since they're not a way that a lot of people want to eat or can continue to eat, almost always people over time gain that weight back again. And so we get in a cycle of weight loss and weight gain, and weight loss and regain, and weight loss and regain. So I think just weight loss diets in general have not been as easy for people to follow over time. They come and go with different names. So ketogenic diets, been quite big recently. That it was high protein before that. I think what a lot of them are doing is may not be entirely bad. People are cutting out carbohydrates in those diets often. And often what they're doing is they're cutting out some refined carbohydrates. So they're taking out some more processed foods, sugars. And so that may not be such a bad thing. But they aren't necessarily getting kind of the wider variety of say, higher fiber fruits and vegetables and whole foods that they could use over the longer term to keep that weight loss off.
Great points. I have noticed my daughters eating a lot more eggs than I would have thought was prudent. Has the thinking changed about eggs? Or do I need to sit them down and have a talk with them?
I think what's changed is the communication. I have to say, as a profession, we maybe didn't do the best job communicating back when there was concern that we might be having too many maybe animal products, especially high-fat animal products in our diet. So we did put out a message about eating less fat, and people did cut back the fat they were eating, and I think it did have some benefits, for instance, in the area of heart disease. We didn't necessarily, though, replace that with the healthiest foods, and so we didn't necessarily, again, get some of the weight loss that some people had hoped for. But unfortunately, in that messaging, eggs really got a bad rap. And I don't think many of us in the nutrition field actually meant for that message to go forward. It just kind of happened, and we weren't real good at communicating that. So the current U.S. dietary guidelines say an egg a day is perfectly fine, and then there's eggs and things that we cook. I think if you have an omelet on Saturday, you're doing just fine. And it's, particularly in these times where, we don't have the ability necessarily to shop a lot, eggs is something you can keep in the fridge, and it's a great source of protein.
Question for Cindy. Have there been any new research studies at UW during the COVID crisis to see what changes may result in physical activity levels and types? In other words, I guess tracking what people are actually doing. Are activity levels way down, or?
Well, we know in general that activity levels are down during COVID, just in general across the board. I mean, I showed you some statistics about children, but we know across the board that they are. One of the disadvantages of COVID is that I haven't been able to be in touch with my colleagues as much. So I'm really not sure. I'm guessing that in our department, this is what we study. I mean, kinesiology is the study of human movement. And if there isn't a study right now, I'm sure that there is one. But I would suggest that people go to the kinesiology website and take a look. There's some great research happening. And this question, might kickstart another study. But I think this is of big concern to people. I mean, and again, will this be a long-term kind of a thing? I mean, are people just a little bit more inactive now because of COVID and they're by themselves and that it'll bounce back up? Or is it like some of the research says that this might become an entrenched pattern that we should really be concerned about?
Yeah, great point. I think we're seeing some entrenched patterns creep into different areas, like in the workplace and elsewhere, things that people think will last beyond COVID. Let's hope that depressed activity levels won't be one of those. Right. Question from James Rottenberg. I think it's probably more up Beth's alley, but maybe you both have thoughts about this. Is there any evidence that eating disorders are on the rise during the pandemic? As we all know, particularly among young women, I think there's a lot of concern about eating disorders. I'm sure it's not limited to young women, but any thoughts on that or any evidence?
Well, as Cindy was pointing out, we do have more some indications that there's loneliness, that there might be some stress or anxiety or depression that's happening. And those things, I think, could trigger more issues around eating. I have not seen any data yet. It doesn't mean that it isn't there or people aren't starting to gather it specifically on teens and eating disorders. But I have certainly heard reports that we are getting changes in how we eat that might not always be healthy. As Cindy was mentioning, some indications people are less active, they might be eating more, and we might be seeing some weight gain. Certainly, it's kind of the topic of jokes and memes on the internet, of going to your kitchen, or, I made one myself about never putting away my wine glass anymore. So we joke a bit about it, but I think that is something that we are concerned about. And I know there are big groups of researchers gathering data to take a look at how this might have changed our health and what we'll need to do going forward.
Can I ask you, Beth?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Are you concerned about the kinds of impacts that we aren't even beginning to see yet? I mean, are you concerned about those sort of long-term effects, whether it's in terms of eating disorders or loneliness or mental health issues? Is that something you're thinking about in relation to health and nutrition?
It certainly it is. I think on the upside, the one thing that people have begin to notice a little bit more is that there's been some more family meals. There have been kids cooking with parents. There has been more cooking, from scratch, if you will. And that is one at least positive trend that we're hoping people to capitalize and keep going moving forward. Some of the issues around how we eat sometimes has to do with eating out, eating fast foods, eating it quickly, eating it in the car on the way to the soccer game. And if we can eat together as a family and do some cooking together as a family, that may bring about some good changes.
I appreciate that. And I think I love the positive sort of perception. I feel the same way. I think parents and kids have been playing together more than they maybe have ever before. So instead of running to the soccer practice, they might be playing soccer in the backyard together. And I love the positive approach. I think that could be a really nice long-term ramification that could come of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think some of those things might stick, Cindy? Will we be less inclined to rush back to especially the young people's organized leagues where we're driving probably more than they're actually competing?
Right. We can only hope, right? And I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a neighborhood where we never got in a car to go anywhere. We ran into the backyard and played with whoever was out there. And, that whole idea of staying together and relating together. And you learn a lot of social skills when, if you're cheating in a game, people don't want to play with you the next day. And, those kinds of things that you learn by just playing with the people that are near you, whether it's parents or siblings or your neighbor kids. I can only hope that some of that stuff sticks. Not that, competitive sports are terrible, but we maybe need a balance of, both of those opportunities for kids.
Yes, might have gotten a bit overdone.
Yeah.
Question from John Sievers for Cindy. How many days per week do you recommend exercise that would be greater than our normal level of just daily physical activity?
Sure. Well, I mean, someone smarter than me has offered really great advice on this, and that's the American Heart Association. And they say that you should get about 30 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity, which is the kind that makes you breathe hard. And so it might be a little difficult to talk while you're doing it, but 30 minutes of that kind of activity a day really is the goal each day. And that is to, get the full benefits of your cardiovascular system working effectively. So yes, the American Heart Association has set a nice goal for us. And that's hard to do these days, especially if you're stuck in the house in front of a screen. So it's turned into a high bar, but we know that most people receive the best benefits physically if that's what they can do.
Wow, that doesn't sound like moderation for me, but oh well.
Well, if you play the little bouncy ball game a little bit, 30 minutes, yeah. You've got it.
If that gets me out of breath, I'm in bigger trouble. Actually, it was kind of hard. Question from Barbara Bruno. Any foods that are good or bad for the immune system, particularly in this time with the coronavirus? I mean, is there something to eating that we should be paying more attention to with the virus around us?
So I would say in general, nutrition for the coronavirus isn't different than the nutrition we would want to fight off any infectious disease. And what sometimes gets confused in nutrition is people read about the role of a nutrient, like say zinc. People have often looked at, should I be taking zinc so I won't get a cold? And really what the evidence is, if you don't have enough, you're more susceptible to getting the disease. But taking an extra supplement of it doesn't necessarily make you better off. So once again, it's more about getting all the nutrients you need and getting quite a wide package. I did a talk a while ago on nutrition and immunity, and when I went to see, what's the latest, there wasn't hardly a nutrient I couldn't find that didn't have a role in our immune system. It's a system just like our bones and our blood and our respiratory system, your immune system, our cells. And so they need all the nutrients that we need in our body. The one nutrient that sometimes here in Wisconsin is a little harder for us to get is vitamin D. It's a nutrient that's made in our skin when the sun is on our face and our hands. But in the middle of winter, there just isn't the right amount of sun, and where the sun is in the sky isn't sufficient for us to get enough vitamin D. So that's one where you might want to take a look at your foods. Dairy products are often fortified with D, and there is some research around having enough D and keeping our immune system strong. Or if someone is really worried about it, have a discussion with your doctor about, what is there something more I should do on D? Is that one nutrient that maybe I should take as a supplement?
Are there other foods besides dairy with supplements that we should focus on for vitamin D?
Most fortified foods have D in them. So I know having worked there, but cereals are a fortified foods that often have vitamin D. The other dairy products, not just milk, but take a look to make sure it's there. Something like yogurt, some of the dairy alternatives, something like soy. A lot of soy products are fortified with D. So just again, look at the side label and take a look and see if they've added some vitamin D.
Great. Another question from John Sievers for Cindy, I think. Any movement recommendations for the older, retired audience? Maybe they don't want to get out of breath for 30 minutes a day.
Sure. I mean, I think really it's not so much our age as it is our general health that I think should guide our activity levels. And again, if this is something new, you should always talk to your physician about, what is appropriate for you. But really, it doesn't matter how old you are. It really matters, how you are, what kind of health you have to start with. So yeah, I mean, in general, we know that walking is just a terrific activity for almost anybody, and there's another plug for your outdoor experience, but it's really great if you can just take a walk a couple times a day or maybe once a day and breathe in some fresh air, and even better, take a walk with a friend. But definitely, check with your physician to see where you are and get some guidance from them on the level of activity. And then after that, world's your oyster. You can pick what you want.
Now I'm going to make people hungry. Someone wonders, any guidelines when serving shrimp cocktail? Temperature, ice, how long can we leave it out? How much horseradish do we need in there?
Well, I can't answer the horseradish. I think that's personal preference. But in general, we say 2 hours for any food that you're going to leave out. So if it's been out for 2 hours, it should go back in the fridge. Something like shrimp, personally, I might move that away as soon as we're done with it, not necessarily let it sit out. I don't know there's a particular reason to think that shrimp would be particularly dangerous. I don't know that you need to have it ice cold either, although just, again, that's personal preference in terms of most people like to eat shrimp that's pretty chilled. But again, 2 hours and you should be putting your food away, putting it back in the fridge.
Great. Question from Ken Dale. What is the worst Wisconsin food tradition from a nutritional standpoint? It's probably deep fried something.
Yeah.
Beer cheese soup?
Oh, yeah. It might be the volume of cheese that we consume with just about everything. But again, I grew up on cheese and I'm not giving it up. So I'm not going to condemn cheese. I think I would probably say that raw beef thing, if people are still doing it, is probably one of our worst. It's, it's not the worst food in terms of nutrition necessarily, but anything that's, just asking us to get food poisoning just doesn't seem like a good tradition.
Beth, I have to ask now, do you have some favorite cheeses that are made in Wisconsin?
I don't know that I do. I usually just pick kind of a wide variety. I've always wanted to do kind of the cheese tour out to the west of the state, but I haven't gotten that since we've been back in the state. I think that, that's out of the question for the moment, but once we're able to get out more, that's something I'd love to do. I think that's one area that Wisconsin has been very active, is working with farmers who are struggling financially to develop some of these specialty cheeses. I know the Food Science Department has a program where some Wisconsin farmers are producing cheeses that they're learning about from, France. I'm not really familiar with it, but I think we've got some really excellent cheeses here in Wisconsin.
Oh, we do. Yeah. No, there's been some great collaboration between the dairy industry and the state and our team over in Cal. So that's great to see. Question from Jackson Rath, and this is for everyone. I love tennis and play all the time. Should I wear a mask while playing singles? How about doubles? I'm in a paused state, so 25% open. So I guess it's not crowded in the tennis center, but do you need to wear a mask? What do you think?
Yeah, great question. I know that tennis was one of the first sports that was made appropriate again. Once we entered the COVID crisis, golf and tennis were sort of the two that sort of opened their doors again. Now that we're in the winter and you're inside again, I think I would lean toward wearing a mask again. I know when we teach in a gymnasium setting, we do all wear masks. And I know it's not really fun because it's harder to breathe when you're wearing the mask. But if you're outside, I think, especially playing singles, it's not as much of an issue, except maybe when you're crossing, at the net in between games. But I would say inside, just to be safe, I would wear a mask if I was playing. I don't know. What do you think, Beth?
I would as well. I mean, it's not particularly my area, but I think you're right. The difference between outdoor and indoor, even though you're spread pretty far apart, one doesn't know the air ventilation in particular circumstances. I would as well.
Yeah.
Question about Fitbits. Are they used at all in working with kids and in physical education today? How do we take advantage of some of those technologies, Cindy?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are lots of different electronics that can be used with kids these days. We went from heart monitors, which, are a little more passé now, to lots of different tracking devices. Fitbits are just one of the kinds. But we often use them as a cognitive learning tool so that we can teach students to learn about what does their body feel like when their heart rate is at the 80% level, the moderate to vigorous physical activity level, so that they can learn about it in a gymnasium setting where we can help them identify the number, and then they can feel what it feels like, so that when they're out on their own, they can feel what it feels like. Oh, you know what? Now I know what that feels like, that moderate to vigorous physical activity level. I'm there. So we use it as an educational tool, not so much as how many steps did you get today, although that is interesting, but really as an educational tool for students to learn about their own heart rate and their own cardiovascular system.
Terrific. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. But I thought maybe each of you could just leave us with one thought, Cindy, regarding physical activity. What would you hope our viewers could take away and maybe be mindful of over the holidays?
I hope, if I could give one thing, that I would give everyone permission to play again. Play with the people in your safe circle. just know that it's okay to get out there and have some fun, and that anything you do that's physical is going to be beneficial to you on a physical level and on a cognitive level, and probably most importantly during this crazy time on a social and emotional level. So go ahead, play.
Great. And Beth, with regard to food and drink, what would you hope our viewers might do?
I'm going to go right with Cindy on her thought of giving permission. I think I want to give people permission to enjoy their holiday foods. We want to be healthy. We want to pay attention to our nutrition, do other things like get rest, but we also want to enjoy our food. This is a wonderful time of the year to enjoy our food with friends and with family, and in a wide variety of ways. So I'd say I want to give permission to enjoy your food.
Wow, I am going to take that and run with it. What an uplifting ending for our holiday edition program. Thank you both for being here. This was really a fun conversation and a chance to think a little bit about traditions and maybe some new ways of doing things. So I wish you both a very happy holiday season, and thanks again for tonight.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks,
and to all your viewers.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everybody.
Well, great. Thanks for joining us this evening. If you missed the beginning of our show or you want to share it, you can just drive people to the WAA YouTube channel. You can always watch it after the fact. In the spirit of these recommendations, I guess we're going to take the next 2 Tuesday nights off. We'll be exercising, eating, drinking, enjoying the holidays, but we'll be back on January 5th. And I think we'll be doing a program, hopefully that's focused on what the long-term ramifications of the COVID crisis might be for cities. There's been a lot of talk about that. We've mentioned it in a few shows in passing, but we'll try to dig into that next week. So thank you for joining us. Have a great evening and a great holiday season, and on Wisconsin.